Thank you. It is a little bit after 8 o'clock. Today is Tuesday, November 5th, Election Day. Tonight we have a general meeting agenda, and that's it. And then after tonight's meeting, we're going to reconstitute the commission. Okay, here we go. Our first item on the agenda is a presentation on Village District from Liz Geiger, from the Architectural Review Board Chairman. If you guys remember, the Village District is something that is in the Town Plan of Conservation and Development. It was in there in '06. We re-upped it in 16. We had some testimony about it, where it has to be in the town plan to be able to be enacted, and Ms. Geiger and her commission, or his board, have taken it up, and going to give us a presentation tonight. We did have some testimony from other people about it, namely Bruce Hill, who submitted a letter for the record in 2000.
I think it was about 2016. He was representing Federal Realty as they were
October
putting together their
2015.
development plans. And I think the sense of Bruce at the time was,
I might just do
the plans are almost done, and a village district would require us to get approval. And the whole sense of a village district is, you have a board that has a little more power than an architecture review board, and they can determine what fits and doesn't fit relative to architecture.
So Jeremy and I met with Liz about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks
2 weeks ago.
something like that. And when Bruce presented it or asked questions to us, it was towards new construction. I think Liz is going to focus on historic districts. That's it for me. If you're ready, Liz, to take it away.
Yeah,
F5
sorry.
If not,
should
I
work.
can add half.
F5?
F5.
Good job. Where is
We
it?
have
Five?
it.
Oh, maybe there's no F5.
Look at the top. No?
There you go. Ah,
But good news is this is what you gave us.
yes,
Here we go.
here we go.
All right, guys. Thanks for your time tonight. I'm Elizabeth Geiger.
Hold on one second, Liz.
Microphones, please.
Why don't you grab a microphone?
Oh, you
Come over here. Oh, grab my, because I want to be able to change the
Not a
slide.
problem.
So grab a microphone.
We're very portable here.
So the other one's TV 79.
Yes,
Just
You actually want
too
me to
bad.
hold a microphone?
Okay.
Like this?
Yep, that's
Yep.
fine.
Perfect.
It doesn't.
It's a lot
You're not
more
going to hear any
fun than
sound.
my
It's just for.
board meetings. So my name is Elizabeth Geiger. I am the chairman of the Darien Architectural Review Board. And we are, our mission at the Architectural Review Board is to review all the commercial design in town for aesthetic soundness. So tonight I'm speaking to you guys about Village District, which is Steve kind of briefed you guys on. This should be a subject matter that you're well aware of at this point, having been in the plan of conservation since 2006 now. So it's a good 13 years this has come in front of us. So my presentation on village districts, and the reason I'm presenting them is for a method to preserve and protect our historic amenities here in town, our landmarks, our buildings, our open spaces, our land. So I'm going to start my presentation for you guys, excuse me, with a quote. And I don't mean to get too poetic on you guys, but I think this is a really important quote for you guys to think about as I proceed through this. And I'm just going to read, if you'll bear with me. Darien's architecture and green space weave critical visual materials reflecting our values and creating our unique character and distinction. Unnoticed, these threads are often pulled, one by one, unintentionally unraveling our surrounding visible historic fabric until we suddenly find we have lost both our sustainability and character. So some little background on how I came to be here. First of all, like I said, I'm the chairman of the ARB. I moved to town about 6 years ago. And the first thing I did was actually get involved in the town government. And I did this because I thought Darien was a unique town. I came from the city. I wasn't really originally from here, but I had a family that had been here for 20 years. And Darien's not like any other place in this country. My family's moved all over the country, and it's extremely unique. And I wanted to participate and kind of put a stamp on that uniqueness as well and be part of that. Similarly, I had actually bought a historic home, the 1875 Relihan house. And when we first moved in, my husband and I started renovating it. Hi. My husband and I started renovating it and restoring it a bit. And so my first experience with preservation and planning in this town was actually an extremely disheartening one, because I found out that we could literally do anything to this historic house and nothing could be done by planning and zoning. The rules stop with you guys saying, as long as I'm doing stuff according to the rules, and I'm not asking for any kind of variances that ZBA need to prove, I can pretty much destroy this house. And that is sad to me, because it's these houses and these elements that make our town and give us the character that we have so far. So that kind of gives you the background of kind of why I care about this and what my personal investment is here. And why this? I'll summarize this now and then get to the details. Implementing a village district zone is the most simplest way to add a layer of oversight in protecting our important historical buildings, foundations, without going through some litigious legal process or creating new commissions, writing new laws. A village district is a way to protect our town and our character and identity without rewriting the script, okay? So we'll go into that. And why now? Darien seeing this the largest commercial development that we've ever seen in history, both residential and commercial. And as an individual town member, as a representative of the Architectural Review Board, and as a representative of the Architectural Review Board, excuse me, I will tell you that we welcome this new development. We love it. We love the new styles it brings in. There's a kind of a misnomer that the Architectural Review Board just wants historic preservation. We just want the old, none of this new stuff. And that's not true at all. We love the new styles, the new vernaculars being brought in town. I think they all need to be celebrated. But alongside all this new development, I think it's extremely important that we don't lose sight of the old and the beautiful buildings and spaces that we have in town that got us this far already. And this coming year is our 200th anniversary celebration, and since our induction. So what a beautiful way to celebrate this year by implementing some village district zones. Poetic, right? Some background. I kind of alluded to this already about why Darien's a unique town, our quality and character. Yeah, I guess I've kind of addressed this slide. You guys should all be familiar with this by now. But again, a point takeaway here is this has been in the town, this has been recommended in our town's plan of conservation and development since 2006 now. So this isn't something new, some crazy idea. This is something that Darien should have been thinking about for some time now. The fact that our town doesn't have any sort of tools for preservation and to protect its identity, actually I found kind of shocking, disturbing. So there are two solutions I have for continued preservation. One is to continue to identify protected landmarks. Planning and zoning, you guys have actually done a really nice job in doing this thus far. But it kind of only gets us so far and it's limited, and I'll get into why it's limited. My second proposal is establishing a village district for the reasons I alluded to and we'll keep getting into. And this can be done by Connecticut's General Statute 8-2J. As referenced, again, in 2006, 2016 town plans. So let me give you some background before I tell you the details of a historic district specifically. I'm defining for you here some different designations, historic designations. The first two are the highest you can achieve in the country. And coincidentally, Darien does have the first two. The National Historic Landmark, that is our Stephen Mather home up at Brookside and Four Corners up there. The National Register District, we actually have on the Post Road between Brookside and Academy. They're both very hard designations to achieve, and it's a very arduous process to go about it. What I will stop and say about these two things is, you know what, no, I'm not gonna do that yet. The next one, you get down to the state level here and the local level of designations that we can achieve. And I'm not going to read the definitions, you guys can do that. But the thing I want to note here is that of all these definitions you're reading, the only one of them is the National Historic Landmark is the only one that protects buildings based on their aesthetic design. So even though we have a National Register District, even though we've got town landmarks, there's still nothing planning and zoning can do to actually protect the aesthetic exterior design, the foundation of all these buildings. So not only are these designations extremely difficult to achieve, they still don't give us the protection that I'm asking for, proposing. On this next page, though, the Natural Architecture Preservation Survey, this is something that was done by the Junior League of Stanford and Norwalk for our town specifically, and it lists over 500 houses in Darien that are of worth of historic preservation. And if you guys think about that, we have 500 houses alone that have no designation, that have no protection, that any owner can just go in and destroy. And to me, that's sad and scary. I think it's about time that Darien steps up and does something about it. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point, and I didn't realize that that was done by the Junior League. They undertook that project for the town. Do you know, or is it available on their website somewhere, or would we be able to get sort of like the criteria or how they determined the 500 properties or houses that were historically significant?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
What's your name?
Tara Gately.
Kara. It's great you asked that question. Good job, Kara, because
This is one folder.
Oh, great.
And it shows the pictures of each of the houses and the description and everything about it that's been studied.
Oh, wonderful.
And these houses, right, some of them are plaqued, some of them are not, and most of them are just have architectural integrity.
this is Marion Castell. She's a town historian.
Thank
She
you.
can't help herself.
Thank you.
But there are two different surveys, and the study was done by, basically they looked at houses.
Yeah. Hold on one second.
Go, no, it's okay.
I didn't want to interrupt your train of.
Let's let her just rock and roll
Okay.
and kill it.
Okay.
And then we'll try to
She is
keep our
killing it.
questions to the end. The only thing I would say, I bet you that book that Marion just referenced, I think that's slide 25 in your packet.
I do give you a sampling of kind of what it looks like, but your question was a little different. Your question actually was like, how did they determine
Yeah, Cool.
this?
exactly.
And that's a different layer, and I can go into that another point in time. I don't really have all those
But you
answers.
don't have to go through it.
but
I just
was-
want to know if we could get that information at some point.
Yes, of course,
Thank
of
you.
course, yes, that's a good question.
Form.
So next page, this just kind of lists our current historical designations. And again, I give this to you just from a perspective, starting with the National Historic Landmark. On this page, any one of these structures can be bulldozed over, because without any sort of law or of checking, planning and zoning can't do anything about it, ZBA can't do anything about it, except for the Stephen Mather home. So, I mean, I hope that resonates with you. It resonates with me. And what I'm not even going on here, see, you don't even see all the 500 places listed on the NAP survey. And there are also houses that have historic designation plaques on them that might not necessarily be part of NAPs. The two of them actually haven't been checked off one another, if that makes sense. Okay. All right, so village district defined. Let me just read this for you guys so it's super clear on what a village district is. Towns can identify village districts for which the local zoning commission may adopt regulations for the design and placement of buildings, maintenance of public views, building materials, and landscaping. Usually, these regulations aim to ensure that new construction is in harmony with existing architectural fabric. So let me kind of break that down for you guys. What that means then is when you are creating a village district, you are creating a zone, another layer of zoning, where the rules to that zoning are based on aesthetic principles, aesthetic design principles. All right, this is a very forward-thinking idea, methodology for design. Let me go into that a little bit more. So this is the exact statute here, 82J, and I have the full legal jargon and kind of those bullets all in my Appendix B if you guys want to really dive into that, but this is the opening of it and, of what that is. So the attribute of a village district, I started speaking about this. A village district is an overlay zone. And why I'm proposing doing this versus going to a historical designation is because we are not changing any of our zoning regulations. We're simply saying, let's adopt another layer of zoning, a second layer of scrutiny that we would put on certain areas in town that we find to be historically worth preserving. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the beauty of the village district being an overlay zone. You're not writing any new laws, you're not changing any of our current laws, and the beauty is we already have a commission that does this. What else did I want to say about that? Yeah, I'll get there. And like the last bullet says, and what the village district does is it's now regulating land development patterns and aspects of development not addressed by traditional zoning, right? So the zoning, your purview stops, and it stops when it comes to design. You're not commenting on how a trim looks or how painting looks or how clapboard versus shingle look, and that shouldn't be your responsibility. But there should be someone in this town looking at that kind of stuff for both residential and commercial, and that's what a village district will do. And that's actually what a historic district would not do, because that doesn't have the legal ability to do that. So, formation of village district, how would this be done? It's done by a vote, a majority vote in the commission. It is then regulated and overseen by the Planning and Zoning Commission alongside a consultant. Now, a consultant would be specifically named as a village district consultant, and you guys would name that. Another beauty of village districts is you could use, well, your consultant could be an architectural review board. So what I was gonna say earlier is a pro to creating village districts versus doing the litigious process of creating of historical designations is you don't have to create any new commissions, any new boards. We kind of already have these tools in place here. So your consultant could be the architectural review board, or you could choose to have your own independent consultant and grab someone free of the town, someone that you just want to comment just on this, or you could pick off certain members of the architectural review board or someone else in town who wants to volunteer for that position. But my point being with this is that you would be working with someone who's specializing in defining these regulations on how to review these historic buildings, these zones for aesthetic purposes. And you wouldn't have to, be creating a new role. Does that all make sense? Okay, I'm just gonna keep moving here, thank you. So these are the identified potential village district zones. And the first thing I should note is you guys have seen these before because they've been noted in our town 2006, 2016 plan guides. I've highlighted the first two because I would recommend when implementing this to start with 1 or 2 zones at a time. And I would recommend the first zone and or the first 2 if you're gonna implement 2 at once. The reason I say this, the Mather Road, Brookside Four Corners is up there at Stephen Mather and Brookside Road. It's already pretty much a historical landmark site. You've got the Mather House, across from it another Mather House. It's historic as well, a graveyard and a Connecticut Land Trust. It's the most historic area in Darien already. I mean, it's a no-brainer for making this a protected area and putting this overlay zone there. The other one is Boston Post Road, which is our National Register Historic District. This is another no-brainer of where we should be protecting the history. Though noted in this area, because it's just a historic district, there is no legal restrictions here if someone does want to go down and tear down these buildings. So that strip, I mentioned to someone that was a historic district the other day, and they're like, what? That area is crap. All these houses are being mishmash. Academy is right across from me, just down from Sedgwick. People, the area has kind of gotten a little, kind of not great looking, a little seedy because we don't have any ability to kind of regulate and keep these beautiful buildings there. So it's kind of become a mishmash of style. Sorry. By the way, I'm remiss I haven't said this yet. It's important to note something. When you're establishing a village district, the beauty of it is the regulations pertain per zone. So the rules and regulations that you guys would write alongside a consultant who specializes in establishing those visual recommendations, regulations, what you would write for Stephen Mather Corner would be very different regulations than what you would write for Boston Post Road, which is very different than what you'd write for Prospect Avenue. And I say that because all those different locations have very different styles to them. Stephen Mather's the original barn house, totally different style than Prospect Avenue, which is beautiful Victorian houses. And speaking of Prospect Avenue, I don't know if you guys have driven down there recently, but it's one of I think the most beautiful streets in Darien. It has such a history to it. And there is a new giant, ultra-white modern farmhouse that has gone up there. And this house might be beautiful in a ton of places in Darien, but I can't even get to commenting on that because this house has gone up on a street that should be protected as a beautiful Victorian street for how it was first founded. And so I think I give you this example because I think this is one of the ideas behind village districts. Planning and zoning, when someone came to propose this new house on Prospect Avenue, you guys say, all right, are you guys meeting all the proper regulations and zoning, any variances, see ZBA? Great, they checked off their boxes and they did, great. But there's no one stopping and looking at these buildings saying, all right, now is there a second layer of scrutiny? Does this building fit in this style? Do we want this building here on this street? And my fear is if we don't look at things from this perspective, this house is going to replace this one, this one, this one. Before you have it, there is Darien is a mishmash of just all sorts of styles everywhere, and there's no real visual beauty that we once had that established and made us the unique town for why we all came here. Sorry, I get long in the tooth there. By the way.
But you're a fast talker.
Okay, I am fast talk. I know, I'm trying to move, I know you guys, we don't want to get home. By the way, Heights Road, I know people have talked about, Steve mentioned this, people proposing a village district for like the new Heights Road development. I think that's an interesting thing. I don't agree with having done that before. There's no need to put a restriction on something we haven't seen yet. But when, in the future, when you guys are developing things, different areas of town, it is an interesting idea that you could then lay a village district overlay zone on something once you say, all right, Heights Road's gonna be buildings of 2 or 3 stories, they're all gonna have this kind of different style, they're all gonna be this setback from the road, this kind of landscape planning. Once you establish that, you can put a stamp on it and say, now this is a village district. And if someone wants to come in and wreck these houses in the future, they still need to maintain this look that we've decided is important in this district, right? Does that make sense, hopefully? Okay. So steps to identify a village district. Pretty simply, this is you guys' bread and butter. You identify the zones of where you want to do it, which I kind of already laid out a few, but, and then you educate the people within that zone of what you're looking to do, right? This is what you guys do all the time when you're doing your plan zone regulations. 2, you inventory the structures. In the first 2 proposed village district sites I named for you guys, that work has actually already been done. Because it's a historic landmark site and a historic zone, the structures there, of 95% of them have already been inventoried. So the work is done. It's easy. It's a home run. Then number 3, establishing the regulations of common with standards of design. You guys have also done this whenever you create different zones, but in this particular case, you would be working with a consultant, the village district consultant, who would help you guys understand what those standards of design should be for those particular zones. Then adopt the regulations and monitor and revise as needed. Here we go. Administration of the village district. Again, this is you guys. This is your sweet spot. You guys know how to. It's the procedure of how you guys get applications. Currently, applications come in, and what this would be is just another layer of scrutiny for buildings within those village district zones. So if someone would come to you for design, for substantial reconstruction or redesign of a building or property, planning and zoning would check your normal boxes, and then if that building was in a village district zone, it would then go to a second layer of approvals, like someone asking for a variance going to ZBA. They would then go to the village district consultant and then have to have their project reviewed for aesthetic soundness in that particular zone. And all the rules and procedures, you govern it just as you normally govern all of your applications. Benefits of a village district. I kind of have been alluding to this through the whole presentation, but basically it's an easy way of protecting the important landmarks in town, preserving our historic landmarks without going through the litigious, arduous process of setting up historic zones, which don't actually protect our buildings and landmarks in the first place. And you're using all our current zoning regulations, we're using all our current commissions and boards. So it's not an overwhelming thing to do. And then last but least, I'd be remiss if I didn't kind of include this in here. A big question is going to be, what is this going to do to my property value, right? That's what we all want to know. And some people are feared that the property values would go down with another layer of restriction on them. And interestingly enough, in 2011, the Connecticut Trust did a study on this. And they found that actually property values increased for buildings within historical zones. And they found that to be the case because people paid a historic premium knowing that their house would be protected and their neighbors would be protected and expected to maintain to a certain standard. And the second part of this study, interestingly enough, is they did this during a recession, which is what we're clearly finding now in our house patterns. And they found that the foreclosure rates in historic district zones was 50% less than houses outside of those zones. And what that means is not that people who live in historic houses are necessarily better off or better financial planners than people not, but they found that historic zones held their value better. So when people in those zones were up against financial trouble, they had more time to sell their assets and sell their places. Does that make sense? So that's it. In my appendix, I go through and I give you guys a bunch of different maps, like the proposed village district zones. This is 5 of them. I've highlighted a lot more here in my presentation. But no, how many? Wait, 8 of them. Wait, yeah, this is all of them. I've got this map. This is our historic zone from Academy to Brookside, and just a bunch of different maps for you guys to kind of mull over, I'll give you more background here. I also list on here a number of neighboring towns who have already implemented village districts. New Canaan is one of them. I'm sorry, the slide's not. Here we go. This sample of the NAP survey, which you have here, and a number of towns that have already done this. New Canaan, a lot of these towns have done it, and they've done it successfully and found it's been a wonderful asset. And Appendix B is the legal jargon as you go through that. So I guess in summary, I'm surprised that Darren is forward-thinking as we are and how much we actually do care about our identity and work to establish it. I'm disheartened that we haven't done it more to protect these assets. And I think a village district is an easy home run, a way we can do that. Again, using our current commissions, using our current laws, using our current boards, and putting some heart into protecting these things that need protection. And if not us, I don't know who's going to do it. And then piece by piece, Darien becomes any town, USA. So that's it. So questions?
The fabric is pulled out. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you did a really nice deep dive into this whole thing. I would actually, before I say anything or anybody say anything, I would like to hear Mary Ann's comments on this. I know she is the town historian.
No, I'm calling really because I want, this is Marion Castell.
Thank you.
Contentment Island Road, town historian. I wanted to say that I can't tell you, this village district, those of you who know me from the past, and you're all new, so you don't really, but this has been one of my themes about preservation, and I'm not talking about keeping everything ye old. I'm talking about just presenting things that are, even the contemporary buildings, something that is really fine is worth trying to keep. And the whole point, in a way, of the village districts is that you have control over the additions, you know, as well. So that it's a growth situation, things. And it's also the open space. I mean, we're talking about fields and walls and all the things that add up, the marshes and the beaches. That has all been part of this NAP survey, in which we did a map showing all of these spaces, and this is what we're trying to hold and keep as much as possible. But it's not just buildings, it's the other part, it's the whole environment that has made us the way we are. And I can't tell you how thrilling it is that we have someone here that can put this together with enthusiasm. And it's been wonderful for me. I happen to have a lot of information, and she took it and she put it together just beautifully. Thank you.
Well, I mean, actually, Mary's good, but she does have a lot of information.
Just, keep the microphone.
Yeah, you have to play microphone, switch the microphone, sorry.
Sorry, okay.
Marian does have a good point. So, like, you know, as you guys navigate this, you're not out on your own doing this. I mean, we've got so much time and investment already put into identifying these sites and work behind it that it's just a matter of putting it together and having someone, the Architectural Review Board happily will assist you guys in that, or whomever. So it's not this daunting task, I think. It's a layup to make this happen if you guys want to. If preservation of our town is important to you guys.
Thank you. A couple comments. With regards to what, for people that do or don't know on our commission, with regards to what the ARB does, they look at every single commercial project in town. So when you're talking about colors of buildings and cornices and roofs and all that stuff, if it's commercial, they automatically look at it. Relative to residential and single-family houses, they don't look at any of it, to my knowledge. Maybe once in a while you might look at it, but there's no statutory or requirement for our town to look at it. So the way I look at what Liz is presenting to us in the big picture is that they're volunteering to be the consultant, because I read the definition, and consultant, I always think it's going to be like, you know, what's it, the
Glenn Chalder.
Glenn Chalder guy, we pay $100,000 to look at an application for a year, and that, I don't really want to go down that road. But as an example, we have like a sewer commission, and we have a parking authority. That's the parking authority in our town is the planning and zoning board. I mean, is the Board of Selectmen. And there's a couple of commissions like that. So if these guys want to be the consultant, and that's what's in the statute, it's fine. Relative to the town of Darien, from what I can understand, is this village district was enacted in 2000. We put it in the 2006 Plan of Conservation Development, which was the first time we could put in. We renewed it in 2016. Nobody, I guess, between 6 and 16 took the ball and ran with it. You know, you guys are, the way our town works is someone has to make an application to change the zoning in our town or add something, and it looks like these guys are stepping up to the plate and they're gonna be the applicant. Our view now is to see, hey, if we think it's gonna be a good idea, or, you know, it's dead on arrival. You know, I think it's a great idea. The only other thing I want to add is, and we did talk about this a lot, Marion Costello has been our town historian for years. In our 2006 town plan of conservation, we do have those placard houses in town. In the 2006 plan, there was maybe, I want to pick a number, 15 placard houses. Between 6 and 16, I think 4 of them disappeared and were knocked down. On my watch, I know at least 1 or 2 have been knocked down that were placard houses. So
Just to follow through quickly on
thank
that,
you.
Steve.
That placard house to me.
I'm also responsible for watching all total demolitions in town. And since we started off in '97 with about 3, and we're up to about 35 a year.
Placard houses or
No,
demolition?
not
demolitions.
just houses demolished, period.
Okay.
Just as a background, not
Right.
plaques. Plaques houses don't get torn down generally.
Can you repeat that stat for us?
Repeat that stat.
Excuse me?
Can you just repeat the statistic you just gave from 97, it was 3, and then you had a second statistic?
Yeah, it was an ordinance that was put in place through the RTM, and there were so few total houses demolished, over 50 square feet, not the garages. It has to have a certain size. And it's just grown exponentially every year. And I have a record of every single one of them, of every year, and it's a long list.
Yeah, I pulled that list, I think a year ago, we were 65 houses on it.
Yeah, there's about 30 single-family houses in Darien every year that are more than 50 years old that get demolished.
Right.
So 5 that aren't, and
Just,
30 that are.
it varies up and down from that. That's a good
Right.
figure.
Yeah.
35-ish.
And some are big houses, some are little.
But there are a lot of them that shouldn't be up there. I'm not saying we have to preserve these
Understood.
things.
Right.
A lot of them are well gone. But I do think that you have to be careful because, as I said before, you don't realize what's happening if you're not watching it. And little by little, things just kind of disappear. It doesn't seem like much, but it's like the image I used was the thread in weaving, and pretty soon you don't have the fabric anymore. And that's just, it's structures, it's open space, it's everything. It's not, I'm looking larger than just buildings.
But then, I was going to say another point, even if you're watching it though, you guys still as planning and zoning really don't have the ability to even do something about it. You guys,
No.
your hands are kind of tied at this point because we don't have the regulations to, you guys have adopted the 90-day demolition ordinance where the town historian goes in with planning and zoning and it kind of gives them buys a little time for town historian to kind of go in and maybe convince them that there are better ways to handle this property than to demolish it. But in the end, it's responsible stewardship. These people decide they want to sell it, make some money, or take care of the place. So
Some people lose money when that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's open it up to the commission. How about we start on this side? You're good, right? You're done?
yeah,
I like Southport, Greenfield Hill, I like Old Lyme. I mean, it's charming. I'd like Darien to look like that. And it's a nice, you talk about it, you refer to it as though it's a shared town resource, which it is. But the properties that this is going to apply to are privately owned.
yes, absolutely.
It's not going to fly. You can't take somebody's house away from them. I don't care what you say about the values and they're actually better and blah, 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 blah. If I own the property where Halsted is, which used to be a farm store, remember, I get what it was called.
Four Seasons Farm.
Four Seasons Farm. And so this thing's sort of like a barn, whatever. But if I buy that building and I want to put up a 2-story office building with black glass on it, you can't stop me on the value that, on the basis that aesthetically it doesn't go along.
Can I respond to that?
Let me try to respond to that first,
Okay.
because Liz and I went over this at our meeting with Jeremy.
Okay, great.
My answer, and you can chime in whatever you want to, and anybody else can do, obviously. When we changed the 16, was it 16 districts? 16 districts or 9 districts over time, that was done in a public hearing, right? And like that Halsted house, that was missed from the sheet, or let's go to the one that was this Christian Science reading room.
Yep.
That was where we changed the zoning for people.
I remember.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so we did it for 16. The first, it's a public hearing, it has to be a public hearing, right? So the neighbors come in and anyone within 50 feet or 100 feet of it gets to say it. So if you're inside there, you do it. It was our, I don't know if it was policy, that's probably not the right word, but our practice was when we changed those ordinances, if anybody that was affected had a problem, had a chance,
Yeah.
we didn't change it. So in my answer to what your question is, I envision this as being the same process. If two things, one, we have to adopt the floating zone district, and then we have to place it someplace. So if we place it, or attempt to place it on the four corners at Mather House, everyone within the area is gonna come in, and anyone says no, I bet you a nickel, we're gonna say, okay, one guy says no, we have to assume that, and then we'll vote on it. Relative, if we do it to the historic district where the ABC house on Brookside, and across the street is it's a church, I forget, it's Lutheran church, it's
Congregational.
Congregational church. If it gets done in that district, everyone in the district will be noticed, and everyone next to the district will be noticed. If somebody in the district, or a majority of people don't want it, I bet you it gets voted down. So that's my answer to that. Do you have anything to add relative to that?
Well, I add to that, that's kind of the reason why I recommend the first two zones, trying those first. The Stephen Mather Brookside corner is kind of a shoo-in, right? You're not even touching, you're touching two historic homes as is that are already dedicated to maintaining historic preservation. They're not gonna change it. So I think that could be a layup of saying, all right, here's the first one. We've got village districts in Darien. You don't need to panic. This is something we already are actively doing. That's the same idea too of the historic Post Road. There might be a couple people that are opposed to that, but again, you're working with a district that's already a historic landmark district, and we're just saying, hey, take knowledge of what you guys are. We're just asking you guys to acknowledge and be part of this. And these are layups because of what they are already considered. I wouldn't say start with Prospect Avenue simply because that's a full residential zone. But let's start with some zones that we know can take this. And then once it's sat with people for a while, you can say, Darien's been doing this for some time now.
May I make a comment to Marion Castell again? You, as I understand it, you form your own procedure of what qualifications and how you do it. You always work with the people, and you don't run things over their heads. You have to get people to cooperate, in a sense. And you can set your own way of trying to reach out and discuss it. So it's not going to be something, and so you are in control of how you work the system of having people agree to be part of it. It's not going to be a top-down thing.
Correct. Yeah. Hold on. Hey, you good? Anything else? We can come
I
back.
disagree with the premise, but I have no further questions.
Yes.
So I'm with Jim. I leave a lot of room to be convinced otherwise, but off the bat, I'm like at Prospect Avenue. I mean, these are private residences. I think Mather Road, I understand, and there could be a space that makes a lot of sense to start it out. The idea of it, I really like. I like preservation, but I do not like making me in charge of someone's private residence and telling them, in aesthetics, as someone who's in real estate, aesthetics are like what he thinks looks good for that 1800. I think, but the other 1800 house, I really like the way they did this corner. And then he says, well, no, but remember the other house, we did it the way Jim liked it. That makes me feel very uncomfortable. I feel like it gives me way too much power over someone's money and their private residence. So I have, especially now in a market that is very difficult to begin with, and construction costs are high. So that's I have multi-layers of, but the idea of it, I feel like there's probably a solution. That we can solve for, but problem we can solve for. I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
One thing about, excuse me, Marion again, I'm sorry. There is such a thing as a historic district, and it's compared to the village district. Historic district has his commission that's been elected to control it completely. And that is very difficult to do. As a matter of fact, we twice, Prospect Avenue almost agreed to it, and then at the end they didn't over the last years. But there are people who really feel as if they like a certain protection because it's part of their investment in their house. And you have to talk to people. And this is the lightest way of handling it. A commission in town will tell you about the kind of shutters you have to have. Will be much more detailed than something like a village district. Gives you more flexibility. You know, you're not going to tell them you have to paint the house. It's really just the major architectural changes that might come along, then they have an architect look at it. It's not going to be a tiny little control thing.
Because in Ridgefield, I've sold historic houses, and that was not the feedback I got from my client who had to go through the arduous process of getting approval.
Historic is versus village.
That was a historic district.
But you can
then.
cherry pick in a historic, is that right?
Well, historic district is completely different.
But I think this drives home the point that I think what we should do, rather than talking about specific streets and specific areas and specific everything, we haven't even looked at what the statute says, what we could do to write our own, if we're looking at this issue, what would the regulation and what would the potential overlay zone look, you know, how would we draft it, what would it look like? And I think we need to tackle that before, you know, historic versus village, the cherry picking, you know, question you just raised, and get to all of the pros and cons of the different designation overlay zones before we get to specific geographic areas in town, because I think that question isn't even ripe yet.
But am I understanding that each individual section would have its own village district and its own design?
It's an overlay
So
zone.
I think that what Jim and Jennifer were referring to is of concern, because you're right, personal liberties and property rights.
Not even a zone.
So I would want to know, I'm a huge preservationist, and I know that, you know, it works in lots of places. I think it would be really up to what the extent of the new regulations in the village were going to be like. Like, do we require them to have shutters of a certain style? Probably not. But do you not, you know, sort of
Village, not
have it be, right, village? But would you have it be very restrictive or not very restrictive? And I understand that saying the Mather Homestead area is a good place to begin. So I think that it could work if we look at the regulations and it's not going to be so consuming. Like, you hear stories of people in Nantucket and other zones where they're getting down to what gray color you can do on one side of your house. I don't see it being that restrictive, but I do see it as being important. And I'm thinking of even sort of some of the properties that we've seen over, and particularly the Brookside property that we had such trouble with. You know, preserving that house was of concern to me, and so that would be something that would be helpful with the village.
Just so you know, we talked about colors a little bit, and Liz and I talked this better. These guys do deal with colors on the commercial side, like taupe and purple and blue, and so I bet you that's going to be
each village
in there.
district could have its own. You know, some probably would never even mention colors, and some might. You know. But I think that it would have to be like the process would be. You could start with one village district, say a presentation, we're going to make these be the rules, and would you allow us to adopt it on this section? And then the board can say yay or nay. But I think that in general, I like the idea. I do. And then so fine balance between being too restrictive and being helpful.
Do you ever live in Manhattan?
Yeah, I've had
Did you ever live in the Upper West
pre-war.
Side?
I owned a pre-war co-op in Manhattan too, and we had restrictions on windows.
I mean, yeah, this isn't a new idea. The fact that Darien doesn't have any sort of restrictions in this regard in any sort of way we're very backward thinking. It is, and that's why I say start with the smart zones and do what planning and zoning, what you guys do best. You know, approach the neighbors, go and say, this is what we're thinking. Let's work with us. Like, I find it hard to find anyone around here who doesn't agree with preservation, just, you know, to some level. So we find what works in each zone, which works for each neighbor. And if, like Steve said, if someone objects, we're like, okay, what are the objections? Can we amend them? Can we change regulations to account for that, loosen it, and still make this happen? Or do we need to scratch this and say, this section's not going to work, let's move to the next one? It's not black and white here. right? We have,
Well, I think you're gonna make everything, first of all of these districts were first outlined for us in the 2006 plan. We didn't just think of them up for you tonight. We're just following through as suggestions. And the other thing, I think it's better to have very general things and not get too specific. And so you could have you wouldn't have to have a regulation for every single district. You know, it would be easier for you. And I think it's really just very general. In terms of a village district as compared to a historic district, which you're talking about, Nantucket, and places where that's important for their commercial life. You know, so that has to be strict there. But I'm saying from our point of view, it's a way that it's the only way in town that you can think ahead and say, what is this going to look like in the future? It's not trying to save something that's there.
Great.
You have someone that puts a new house in or puts an addition on, and you ask some architects to come in and help as a consultant, and you're saying that you're talking about what you're building for the future. It's a completely different approach than saying, here it is and we can't do anything about it. This is you taking apart and forming what the future will look like. And it's done in a very general way and it will be done trying to cooperate with everybody, I would think, as much as possible.
The way I visit, it's the same way you do it for commercial areas. I mean, if David Genovese comes in and he wants to make it pink with tall doors, you go, that's fine, but how about if you change this and this and this?
Well, there's a regulation that we can't, as you know, we can't make any comments on residential.
Make suggestions.
Well, we can't even make suggestions. That came up this year.
Wait, I'm sorry.
And one issue on Rings End Road, we were told very clearly by a local lawyer that we couldn't even make a suggestion or make any comment on the house, even though it was referred to us by the zoning board of appeals.
That's
that
residential, that's not commercial. Okay.
Right. Well, I mean, the fact is our architectural board has several architects on it right now. And so that's one thing, you get them easily that way.
George?
I'm torn. I'm skeptical that there is not a negative impact on fair market values of a property that didn't have a restriction one day, but on another day now has a new restriction, a new bureaucracy to deal with in order to make an addition or change the color of the house or something of that sort. But I noted Marion's comment that some neighbors like protection. Not only their house, but their neighboring houses, and I can understand that too. As I say, I'm torn. I have an open mind. I'd like to hear more. I don't know that I want to go too far down the path of creating all these regulations when it's not really going to be practical, really implemented around, because that's not a small task. And I'm a newcomer here. I've heard you say a couple of times, you know, we're strong about working with neighbors and explaining and dealing with. I'm not sure that's so true. We expect them to come to us in hearings and say their bit, and we consider, and then we decide. So I don't know how that process would work. As I say, I want to keep an open mind for now, not knowing what the next step is, but that's my thought.
Can I jump in there too? And I'll say to the Planning and Zoning Commission and to us in general, you know, if we don't make an effort, if we don't do it and stand up and try and figure out ways to do it, then there is nothing. And then, so Darien, as we know it, will be gone. Maybe we don't care. Maybe, you know, who gives a heck? But I think it's our responsibility, all our boards, to make that effort and to try. And if we've done our piece, then that's fine. And we'll fold it up and we'll move on to the next project on Pear Tree Point, having a bunch of people in line about that one. But I think there's some cause and I think there's some legs with this. And I think people in this town would appreciate the uniqueness of it. And I think they'd be, especially the old guard, who are the ones barking for places like Pear Tree Point right now. These guys are the ones that like really understand the importance of this town. And I think they'd really be on board, those barking dogs, to see something like this put in place. Again, start with the easy location. Start with Stephen Madden Corner. See how it works. Look at it. Look at the regulations. See what did work, what didn't work, and then let's try another one.
I would not over-regulate, though. I'd have it general as I could.
Let me ask you a question. I think it might make everybody come. When a project comes to you on the commercial side, like and pick pick an easy one maybe if it's easy. The federal project where Stop and Shop is. How much do you deal with them relative to style and colors and architecture? What do you guys do?
That's what we're doing. We're reviewing the designs from simply an aesthetic point of view, from the lighting schematic to the landscape plan to the style of the building, the color of the building, the roof of the building, the angle, the setback. That's the whole thing, looking at it from a smart aesthetic perspective. And we're loving all different types of design for that. Now, our recommendation is simply that. It's an advisory recommendation. These guys can take it or not. But we sit here and serve here as experts. We're a panel of experts that you're getting for free to advise you on the best way to make a building that will hopefully give you the best value for your building, right?
Yep, that's what I thought. So there's no real, you don't have a real strict playbook.
No. It's an adaptation for each design. You know, even in Federal Realty, what was great on Site B there, you know, they have multiple buildings. What was great for Building B was different for Building C, different for Building A. They're merging a lot of different styles and stuff there. It's just about making sure that each of those styles it has its integrity of its own, right?
And it's supposed to work with a little harmony. I look at architecture as kind of music. There's a sound between buildings, and they talk back and forth. And this is where a good architect can see that harmony very often. And this is what is also important. It's the interrelationship of buildings.
Great. The only other thing I would add, and I want to move on to Kara, is with regards to that little piece of property on Sedgwick, with the old
Bank of
America building. We saw the architectural plans for it, which is a rough sketch. We're concerned with setbacks and height and parking and whatnot. And I asked the guy, has Architecture Review Board seen this or not yet?
No.
And they had not. And Jeremy and I joked about it after. It went to Architectural Review Board, and they wrote a nice letter, which was pretty direct, that said, you're right next to our historic district. Basically, we don't like your design.
Yeah.
And that's the layer that the Architecture Review Board has on commercial that they don't have on residential.
Right.
That's all. Okay.
And that is, it's purely advisory. It's saying you take this or not, right? This is just our professional opinion.
Right. Kara.
No, I think it's something, I think before we look at specifics and get into, like, we have to look at what the statute says and how much leeway and ability there is in drafting the zoning for this, you know, how we can draft it in a way that allows flexibility before I think we get ahead of ourselves and look at zones and where specific properties and locations would be considered when we don't even have the zoning regulations drafted yet. So I think there's a lot of work to be done before we start looking at, you know, and then I think once we see, okay, do the regulations, does the state regulation allow us to draft these, you know, to make these zoning regulations in a way that protects the property owner's right to contest it and to preserve their, right to own their property and do what they want with it free, you know, which there's already regulations on what they can do with their own property. So it's not like we're all of a sudden imposing a burden on them that they're unregulated totally now. They have regulations on them already.
Right.
It's an added layer, but I think we have to look at the statutes first and look at what village means versus historic and kind of educate ourselves and see, you know, how other towns have written their zoning regulations on this and what may work for us, what may not work. I think before we look at, and I feel comfortable taking that view since so much work has already been done, identifying areas, we can kind of put that to the side and focus on, you know, the zoning piece, which is kind of our purview. And the planning side, the plan does talk about preserving open spaces and preserving our coastal resources and preserving scenic areas. So I think it fits within our planning responsibilities, but I think there's a lot of work to do.
From what I gather, the other village districts, usually they're a very individual way they handle it.
The
So
other
it's up
towns,
to you.
the other towns cross
The different towns
Yeah.
sort of decide on their own. There isn't one little rule that the book that you have to hand out.
Right.
So you have a lot of flexibility in toning it to what you want. But of course, Jeremy can get a lot of this with some phone calls.
We do that on all of our zoning changes. We look to all our peer
Sure.
towns. Same way we look at schools.
I think that we should go ahead and give it a try in the Mather one and see how it goes. Nothing, go ahead and approve it, but draft it all up, do all the work, and then, we'll have a public hearing and see how it goes.
The land trust, I think, would support that too.
Great, they're
Because
gonna
they
help
have
you
that
draft
big, they own the property and the cemetery.
Yep.
And all the way over to Norwalk line.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And
We get-
thank Liz, she's
Thank
fantastic.
you, Liz.
They did, they did.
Okay. We're all done with that? Okay, let's move on to our next item on the agenda.
Value statement.
Discussion of and regarding input to community value statement for the Board of Selectmen. This has been kicking around for about a month now. Kara started with something we talked about at a meeting, I don't know, probably about a month ago. I think the sense of our meeting at the time was to pull stuff out of the town plan of conservation and development, synthesize it together, and then spit it out and see what happens. Kara took the lead on it, made a couple of comments. I looked at it. We're ahead of the curve, so now everyone gets a shot to look at it. Kara, why don't you take us out and tell us what your thought behind this was at the beginning and where it came from, and where you started the draft from?
I started the draft, if I can remember, it was put into an agenda on one of the meetings at the request of the Board of Selectmen. It asked each of the commissions and boards in town to...
Right, but did you pull your initial bullets from something, or did you start?
I pulled the initial bullets from comments. I think we looked at, Jeremy circulated from the Darien, the 2016 plan of conservation development, the value statement in the beginning. There was some discussion at a meeting, that the commissioners read it. There were some comments about certain verbiage was sort of not favored, other things were favored. I kind of took notes of what people said at that meeting, took that value statement, looked through the plan, took the statement of, I think, goals and objectives that the Board of Selectmen had drafted, ones that seemed to be pertinent and fall sort of in the planning and zoning responsibilities. I included in here. So I kind of took what people said at the meeting, what was in the statement of values from the plan, what was in the plan, and kind of things that were circulated by the Board of Selectmen.
The only thing I would add to what Kara said is I spoke to Jamie a little bit about this at an OPC meeting where I showed this, and I said we have ours ready in the draft and we're going to look at it at our next meeting. The only thing I think she said to me either on record or after is that whatever we put forth, they're going to look at it, probably edit it, and the only thing she really said I think was trim it down.
This is over-inclusive, so I
Right.
took a lot of things so that there could be discussion.
There might be
I didn't want it to
repetitive.
be just my, I wanted to include as many things that I thought, it's easy to cut things out,
I would maybe cut out,
whatever you want.
So I think if we do something and we submit it to the Board of Selectmen, I think they're going to look at it, they're going to make comments, send it back to us, and then it's our document, so we're going to ultimately say yes or no.
I don't know
I
if
guess
the-
what's not clear to me is it really our I think we're adding input to a town document. So I don't think the planning and zoning section, it's gonna be a unified town value statement. And I think the Board of Selectmen wanted input from all the boards and commissions in town to give input towards a single statement. So I certainly do not think this entire thing will end up in it.
So my thought is we've come up with an answer to this thing, we submit it to them, and then take it from there.
Yeah.
Why don't I start off with the review?
If there's things that aren't in here that should be, I think that's maybe, important input. It's easy to cut things out, but it's harder to once it gets outside of here and starts getting incorporated, that we left something out, and to having other people's views, not just me reading documents to kind of come up with everything. Sometimes having other people talk and say what's missing is kind of really valuable.
George, why don't you take us out first?
Well, one thing that jumped out at me was, unfortunately, it's the shortest piece here, probably, so we don't pick up in space, but reviewing potential redevelopment for higher uses. I'm not sure that we should be determining what our higher use is if somebody's
I don't
coming
even
to
know what
us.
that means.
That's me, that's
Yeah, I
actually, that was,
jumped that whole line.
that's actually me.
I'm just gonna, these are just my comments.
That's fine. No, that's actually me. What, converting something to a higher use, the best example of that is Garden Homes.
These are fine.
It was a vacant office building that couldn't be leased.
Get rid of that.
It was the P and Z's idea to convert that to apartments.
Which one is Garden Homes?
Garden Homes, what's the address?
Across from Rory's.
Across from Rory's?
It's
Oh,
a
yeah, yeah.
brown two-story office building,
Yeah.
set back a little bit off the road.
How about, is
Good.
that
Who
like,
did that?
is
Some
that
private-
like,
Garden
B-
Homes.
but
Yeah.
is that like,
Garden
Yeah,
Homes
so, I
owned
mean,
as an
it
office
could be our
building.
suggestion, but it's not what the
but is
commission's
that like
mandated to
be
do.
flexible,
You're all
like,
talking over each other again.
We're trying.
Thank you.
So to answer your question, that's where the thought comes from.
okay, so,
I mean, it
I'll
is
try to
part
work
of
it.
our purview, you're right, and it happens, but I don't think it should be in the goals and objectives.
That's fine.
I'm just saying. So I was just getting rid of a few.
George, are you done, George?
I'm not sure, again, I'm a newbie, so I don't know what collaboration we have with other town boards and commissions considering development, location, and opportunities. I don't know exactly what that's about and how productive that is or for this piece.
The example of that is ZBA annually, biannually, will send us a list of things that they bump into too often. And they'll send us a list and say, hey, can you guys fix these 5 things? Because they say yes or no. So that they come up with a problem, and then we sue it. And that's the same thing with Architectural Review Board. If they say, you know, for whatever thing they suggested, and they run into all the time, and they always make a change, could we make the change?
Interesting, okay, not aware of that, so, whether that's part of a value statement or not, I don't know, whatever you like. Yeah.
Liz? You
can
can just cross it out and submit it to Jeremy and go from there.
Yeah, that's fine, that's what I'll do. I think that in general, the same exact as Georgia, because getting rid of this
That's
last
fine,
little
yeah.
paragraph, the second one, and the
second one on which page?
sixth on the second.
Yeah, I mean,
Little blurb, the second paragraph and the sixth paragraph. I would
On
get rid of.
page 2.
Yeah, and then the bottom one on page 1. And then I would just,
wordsmithing,
yeah,
yeah, we do it all the
wordsmithing.
time.
And then the stuff that I think that, yeah, we did, you're right that we do sometimes make good suggestions for people, but we really have, as I say on my last night here as a board member, there's a lot going on here, and you have to look at all these projects and they come at you, so you sort of have to stay focused on, you know, helping residents in the town get things done, helping new developers get, you know, new developments like Norton Heights and Federal Realty and Corbin District redone. So some of them, I don't think are really in our purview, like thinking up new zonings. I mean, you tackle it, and we did get to do all that with Glen Chandler and Chandler.
Right.
And, you know, change zones and stuff, that's good. And those are tasks that can come up like almost every decade, right?
They do. You good?
Yes.
So it looks like we have some.
Nice wordsmithing, matching it up.
So, I mean, I think there's a, it's, here. So, do you want to put your name on top?
I
Yeah, just right, Liz.
congratulate Carol for doing this.
Yes, so much, because obviously none
This is
of.
a job nobody.
Yeah, it was a thankless job, thank you.
No, it's
We really
not.
appreciate it.
And it's never been clear to me precisely what it is.
It was not clear to me either.
Powers that be are
Me
looking
neither.
for.
Me neither.
Under those circumstances, I think, give them more than you think they want, and let them take
Yeah,
Exactly.
Easier to
obviously.
cut out.
what
You
Exactly.
what
did a
they
great
don't
job.
want.
You
I-
probably
I
learned
did
more
not
than I
do-
did in a year.
I have no suggestions.
Yeah.
I think it's fine the way it's done.
I don't-
Thank you. Carol.
You're welcome. No, but I think like, right, it's
They're gonna cut
clearly over-inclusive, but is there anything that's like glaringly missing?
Right,
that should
yeah,
be
I think
in
that's
there?
what she's asking.
No,
I don't like-
no, you did a great job.
Okay. I think we beat that enough. There's some items to answer some of your questions that I put it, but we can talk about that another day.
You want me to read this?
Sure, we're gonna go to now our deliberations. Go ahead, fire away.
All right, deliberations only on the following. Special permit application number 309, Grieb's Pharmacy, 1021 Boston Post Road. The proposal to install a 4-seat coffee bar for the purpose of serving baked goods and drinks.
Now, we looked at all these, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 on here last week. I'm guessing that you watched some tapes.
Yeah, I did.
Most of these, to me, from what I remember, were non-controversial, so if we can bang them out, that'd be great. Grieb's Pharmacy, they're just adding a ice cream counter.
No issue.
No issue.
I move that it be approved.
I second that motion.
Well, do you want us to
No,
draft something for next week?
wait, you know how it goes. Would you please, you move to have Jeremy and his
Draft it.
team draft
Yes.
a positive resolution?
Yeah, we'll turn it around for next week.
My
These are,
motion,
we've,
Next week?
There's no votes at this
My motion is
meeting.
having
You're not allowed to vote today.
amended.
but
Thank
what
you.
we'll do is, because these are relatively straightforward, Fred and I anticipated that the comments might not be extensive, and thus we'll spend a little time tomorrow and Thursday,
I'm trying to keep you
get
to
them
an
in the
hour.
packets. So there you go.
Got it.
Grieb's,
Next one.
no major
Business site
comments.
plan application number 146-F, special permit Dynamic Athletics, 319 Boston Post Road. Proposal
You
to
skipped
create.
one. You skipped one.
Oh, so sorry.
But that one's
Back
okay
up.
too.
She's anxious to
See,
get out of
I
here.
checked it off.
That one's okay.
Amendment to the business site plan application number 162, special permit for the Everwell, 19 Old Kings Highway South. Proposal to create the open air rooftop deck.
Now, this is the one where they're gonna put a rooftop deck at 19 Old Kings Highway. We got two presentations on it. One was an informal hearing, one was a specific hearing. The only thing that I would add is, are we just glassing over this definition of what we're gonna call this thing, or we're just gonna go with what Dave said?
I think rooftop deck, the
Is
sense
what
I got
they
from the
said?
commission was everyone seemed comfortable, it describes what it is, it's not an at-grade deck.
Okay. Questions, comments?
No issue.
Nope.
Okay.
Great.
Looks like that looks like a recommendation to write a positive report.
Yep.
Next.
Business site application 146F, special permit Dynamic Athletics, 319 Boston Post Road. This is a proposal to create a finished space in the basement for personal training.
Okay, that's fine. We approved this years ago to go from a restaurant to a dynamic fitness center. They did not get the basement approved at the same time. Now they want to use the basement. In our hearing, we did not hear any issue that it was going to put a strain on parking, because there's probably only going to be 5 people down there. Is that right? I think it was 6.
You
Two
said a
trainers.
maximum of 6, yes.
Yeah, 2 trainers and 2 participants in each room.
Correct.
How about start on this side this time? Jim?
I
Jen,
think it's
any
an
comments?
excellent idea. I have no comments.
No issue.
No, I mean, I think to your parking point, the fact that they have software that controls the people in classes and the people who can make appointments with the trainers can, it's not just their word saying it's only gonna be this number of people there. They actually have, software and a control around that to ensure that there won't be, parking issues. And they have the agreement with the business neighbor for overflow parking because of the hours difference with the designer. So I think,
Yeah, it's an understanding. I
Yeah,
don't know
given
if
the
I put
closest to
that inside
residential.
the resolution, though.
that's why I think those controls are important.
We'll make some reference to parking because that's,
It's close to residential.
Right,
but
okay. So recommend Jeremy write a positive report. Okay, next.
Landfilling, excavation and regrading application number 463, Patricia Ledger, 10 Spring Grove Street, proposal to regrade the property with a association with an expansion.
This is a woman on a private street that's kind of on a paper corner. It goes way, way up in the back. There's a water problem coming down the hill. They're going to make one rain garden bigger and create a second rain garden. The neighbor behind was very appreciative of it, and I think all the neighbors on the street are appreciative of it. It is, to me, a big task to do this, but they've got good engineers and good people. Any comments?
I thought the neighbor support was really, really, they seemed very sincerely supportive of her and her efforts, so.
This way?
And I think
I
she's
just-
going the extra mile.
I just want to make sure it's engineered properly. That's all I care about.
got it.
This thing collapses, we got a big problem. Next.
Landfilling, excavation and regrading application 468, Lisa Austin Pearsall, 431 Plate Street, proposal to regrade the property in association with an addition.
This is a house that's directly across the street from Woodway's paddle tennis courts. They have an existing circular driveway now that's not compliant with a bunch of different regulations. They're knocking down a portion of the house, adding a 3-car garage. They're creating a 7-foot high retaining wall on the left side of the house, 4 to 6 foot high retaining wall on the back of the house to hold back the railroad tracks. Again, the walls have to be engineered properly. We're not going to really comment on the on the 2 driveways that are not in compliance with the 50-foot rule. My only request is to make sure the bush that's between the 2 driveway entrances gets relocated, is what they said they were gonna do.
Does she have a problem with the state, given that that's a state road?
If they don't change the driveways, there's no problem with the state, because it's
Grandfather.
kind of sort of grandfathered. That was a little bit gray. They are repaving half the driveway, maybe not repaving the first 4 feet, but
But that's not our concern.
that's not our concern.
Okay.
Jen,
Oh, sorry, with it.
you guys decide? Good? Okay, next.
Landfilling, excavation, and regrading application 467 Scott and Kristen Peloso, 10 Homewood Lane. Proposal to regrade area of the property in association with construction of a new driveway.
This is a driveway that comes into the house, and they create a new circular driveway, which is kind of a portico share to the front door. It's more than 6 inches that it's got to be graded, so we're supposed to look at it. They're also going to grade it more 6 inches to the left of the garage, and expand the driveway in the back there, and it's less than 25 feet from the house. We did have a comment from a neighbor that really had nothing to do with 10 Homewood, it had to do with 12 Homewood.
Oh, yeah.
The other driveway.
The other driveway, he just
That they
asked
know.
questions, we can ask his questions.
Yeah.
No other concerns. This side first? This side second? Please write a
Fine.
positive report.
Okay.
One more.
Landfilling and regrading application 290-A John Nelson, 51 Arrowhead Way. Proposal to regrade the southern portion of the property and install new stormwater management.
This is, I negated to say last time, this is the guy that wants to put a lacrosse field on the side of his house. He has an existing lacrosse net there. The floor, I think, the property now maybe slopes a little bit to the, I'm gonna say right. They're gonna do it to the left. My one concern was that the drainage pipes are underground. We're gonna drain to the right to the neighbor that's downhill. They said they're gonna pitch them
Pitch it
to the
the other way,
left, to go back to the slope of their hill. And it's supposed to all drain property. 2 engineers, or an architect and an engineer looked at it and signed off on it. I had no issues in it. Hope as across goal space gets bigger.
Can you use it for soccer?
Probably.
All good, all good.
Good?
Good.
Good? Okay, positive report on that one. Next thing on the agenda is project status update. I did mention that Parasol was on my lacrosse team, but that's,
Pearsall?
yeah,
Or
that was,
Nelson?
that was application number 468. Project status update report.
Real quickly, Old Town Hall Homes continuing to move along, which is the Royal at Darien. And as I mentioned, I think I mentioned it last week, the first part of the Federal Realty project, the Walgreens work with the associated drainage, that permits in our office. Dave Keating's currently reviewing it. We expect it to go over to building, probably next week sometime.
And the first thing they're doing is relocating the ATM, is that right?
They have 2 permits, one for one of the ATMs to demolish and rebuild, and the permit for the new Walgreens foundation and the drainage, and to demolish Prism Paints, which is on Norotan Avenue, and I think it's the old Greenwich Hospital building, which is near the, I'll call it the existing Stop and Shop driveway.
Okay.
So they're gonna be starting work, maybe as soon as later this month.
The only other thing I would add to that is now there is a demolition notice sign in front of Fabricare. That is gonna be there for 90 days, 2 weeks, how long is that there for?
30 days.
30 days, okay. So that also has a demo permit, whether they, after they clear the 30 days, will they start demoing? I don't know, but you have to apply for the permit
Is
first.
that in the same strip of buildings where the bookstore was? and
Correct.
Yes.
Pizza was?
It's a little paper sign, black and white, that says demo. If you want to hear, you want to complain, go see somebody.
So wait, it's up for 30 days. Do they have a time frame to when they have to start the demo?
No.
No, they've done a lot of the paperwork already.
Mhm.
They have to do certain remediations and get people to go in. In this case, Marion Costello's already approved, if I recall, approved it for demolition. So there's a lot of things that they've done and that they'll continue to work on over the next month.
But there's no parameters around when it starts or stops.
No.
Once they clear all the hurdles, they get to cut off utilities and let, once they get all that sign off,
It's not like they have to start demoing that.
Right, I mean, that's
But they
interesting.
can't start demoing until they get all the utility hookups and signups and cap the water and electricity. David Janvise, nothing. That's the three big.
I've been in talks with David, he's moving along, but he's, let's just say he's doing a lot of work behind the scenes, as are the Palmers, working on a variety of things that need to be done prior to getting going.
Does anybody in the commission have any questions on other projects that they want to status on? He just mentioned the 4 biggest ones in town. Okay. Good, yes? You good? Next, calendar update. Jeremy?
We meet next week. It's a general meeting. We're going to just draft up some resolutions. We got some extension of time requests. We might have an executive session with town council. I think that meeting is in room 119 downstairs next week. And then on the 19th, which is 2 weeks from tonight, we'll also be in room 119. That will be a public hearing night, 6 or 7 public hearings. And then we'll have to make a decision about whether we meet once more before the year is out.
And on the 19th, that's when the Nature Center's
The
coming back.
Nature Center will return. We have a few landfilling and regrading applications. We have a change of zone application, so it'll be a full night.
Has Nature Center submitted anything to you yet that we requested, or they don't have to for?
Not yet, they still have 2 more weeks.
Okay.
We don't meet on the 26th, though, right?
We are not scheduled at this point, that's Thanksgiving week.
Any questions on the calendar?
I'm not here
update?
next week.
That's correct.
Okay. Before any other business, can I just have a motion for any other business? Any other business?
Motion for any other business? Is
Yes.
what you want me to do?
Yes.
Yes.
I would like to thank, the other businesses, a thank you. I'd like to thank Liz Riva. So you're on the agenda.
It's been a wonderful couple years.
She's
Good luck in the
very
future,
good,
everyone.
very good commissioner that we had a lot of great input.
If I
for the-
see anything, I'm coming into public meetings.
Go right ahead.
Promise?
You go right ahead.
Yeah, for historic.
Seriously, I think you did a great job.
Thanks.
Thank you very
It
much.
was
It was
fun.
nice sitting next to you for
was
for
fun.
however
And
long
to
it was.
anyone out there, join. Everybody, they always need great volunteers.
With that said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
That's Jen, second by Liz. All in favor? Eyeball.